What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years of experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today, we're going to be continuing our new Golden Age comic book conservation project on this copy of All-Star Comics number 55 from 1950. We're going to be doing a full aqueous submersion bath for cleaning and deacidification, and some archival tear seals on one of the interior wraps. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you are subscribed to the channel, thank you sincerely. If you hit the bell icon, you'll be notified when we have new videos going up. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do so. It helps us reach a wider audience here on YouTube and create more of a community around our favorite hobby, comic book conservation. In case you missed it, in episode 1 of this series, we did a complete walkthrough of the book, assessed the condition, paying special attention to any defects that affect grade, as well as use of the comic book and permanence of the paper. We determined we had a mostly solid and complete comic book that presented reasonably well and could be read with some care, but with some significant flaws. These include a severe spine roll, a piece missing to the cover, some chipping along the right edge of the front cover, and a severely tanned cover to the point of the paper being brown in the most severely tanned areas. The interior pages were, for the most part, beautiful, with off-white to cream pages and only a few minor flaws, including a pulled top staple on the centerfold and a few very small tears on the reading edge of the first few wraps. We estimated the grade at approximately a 3.0 or good, very good. We developed a conservation plan for this comic book that includes assessment and documentation, disassembly, wet clean and deacidification of the cover with tear seals and paper reinforcement, and the same treatment of the interior wraps as well. After we get everything cleaned, mended, and dried back out, we'll reassemble the book without the spine roll and give it a good finishing press. If the conservation is successful, we can expect a comic book that has cleaner and brighter paper with a new lease on life, usability, and permanence. The comic should have an improved grade and also be easier to read without risking further damage, and the natural lifespan of the comic should be extended by a century or so by virtue of the deacidification we'll perform. It should also present much better and all around be a better collectible. I intend to send it to CGC to be graded and enter it into my CGC registry collection as a placeholder until I can find a high-grade copy of this rare comic book for my collection. In episode 2 of this project, we disassembled the comic book, setting the staples aside for reassembly, preserving their location and orientation information. Then, we did a few more measurements of the paper quality and dimensions of the cover and set it aside for deacidification, tear seals, and reinforcement at a later date. I've created a playlist for this project. You can check it out to see all the videos in the series by following the link in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Alright, time to get started. So here are the interior pages. I decided to wash these first because I ordered an 18-inch ruler and I want to get some measurements when that comes in of the cover. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the interior wraps this time. And I'm going to start with the first wrap. Remember, this wrap had a few tears in the edge that we're going to have to repair. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the wraps back in this Mylar on an acid-free backer board. Again, maintaining a clean and organized workspace, very important, minimizes problems, mistakes, errors. So here's the page we need to work on. I did measure it off camera. It has the same height as the cover, exactly. Let's have a closer look at these tears. So 1, 2, 3, and there's a fourth small one right there. So I'm going to repair 1, 2, 3, 4 tears. Those are technically called tear seals, what we'll perform today. And we're going to clean and deacidify this paper and seal up those 4 tears. That's our mission for the day. So I'm going to walk you through every step of how I do that. And it'll be a little bit of a lengthy video because I'm going to provide all of the details. So before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and put the page between 2 sheets of Hollytex. We're a long way from actually mending those tears at the moment, but this is going to just be the substrate that will keep this page safe and support it throughout all of the procedures we'll do today. I am going to humidify this page prior to doing the full aqueous bath. The purpose for doing this is to acclimate the paper to the water by putting some humidity into it first. And we are using sized paper. Remember, these interior wraps are newsprint, but they're sized, which makes them just a little bit hydrophobic. The substrate we're using, which is Hollytex, is hydrophilic and has a huge surface area owing to the non-woven fibrous nature. So this is going to help us wet the page, but the humidity should help improve that wettability just a little bit. We probably only need 2 hours in the humidity chamber, but for this video it was left overnight. We're going to do a full aqueous submersion bath with 25% saturated calcium hydroxide solution in tap water. I do have well water. It is filtered. It is hard, so it's already starting off basic. This is my saturated calcium hydroxide solution, and I'll just show you how I mix up the first bath. It's just 100 mils of my saturated calcium hydroxide, and then 300 mils of my well water. Again, it actually is double filtered. I'm going to go ahead and just pour it over the page. Again, this is a photo development tray that I use. I have a link to this exact tray in the description of the video where you can purchase it from Amazon. And so the Hollytex is going to assist in the wetting here, but again, the page is hydrophobic because it's sized paper. And so I'm going to manipulate it this first time to get the paper saturated. And that'll include whatever I need to do, obviously gently handling the Hollytex, not the paper itself. I want to make sure there aren't any bubbles underneath the page. This is really only necessary this first time when we're trying to get it wet. Once it's wet, this isn't really an issue. Flipping it will help. You can use your hands to push bubbles out. This is an alkaline solution, but it's perfectly safe for your skin. I do like to make sure that the Hollytex is flat so that I have a nice layered sandwich. And then I like to use a squeegee to just very gently push any air bubbles out from underneath and also move some fluid around. And that'll assist in the wetting of the paper as well. Remember, I'm not squeegeeing the surface of the paper here. I'm squeegeeing a sheet of Hollytex, which is a non-woven polyester fabric. Very strong, wettable, lots of surface area. All right, after 5 minutes elapses, it's time to remove it from this bath. And I like to use this method where I roll the sheet. Again, it's not the paper itself, it's Hollytex, then the paper, then Hollytex. I roll it off the edge of the photo development tray. This seems to just wring more of the fluid out, and so obviously we get a better rinse effect. And I'm going to let the page rest on some paper towels on my hobby mat while I pour off this rinseate. And it does look like we've removed quite a bit of tanning. I don't think we've removed any significant ink here. This is pretty much just contaminants, tanning, acids in the paper. Let's have a look at just how dark that is. I've rinsed off my photo development tray. Pretty dark. We have seen darker. Note that we did not use a surfactant here. This is literally just a basic calcium hydroxide buffered water bath. So we've removed quite a bit of contaminants. We're definitely going to want to do at least a few more washes. Ideally, we'd like that rinseate to come off more or less clear. This is the exact same solution. I just made it up off camera. So it's 25% saturated calcium hydroxide. You'll note now that the page is wetted. I really don't have to do a lot of manipulation to get it in the tray and make sure it's bubble free. So this is 5 minutes later already. You note I have some fresh paper towels on the right. I do like to make sure the page is centered pretty well in the holly text. So during the manipulation, sometimes it'll slide around just a little bit. That's me manipulating it to recenter it. And again, I'll slide it off the edge, which just wrings a little bit more of the water out. And you can see that water's still quite yellowed. So we're going to have a few washes here. Let's have a look at this rinseate while our page rests on the paper towels. Having it on the paper towels again just helps wick more of the fluid out of the page, gives us a better rinse effect, helps us get a cleaner page with fewer total washes. So it is a useful step to do in between here. Let's have a look at the rinseate again. Almost as dark as the first rinse. That's okay. We will continue to rinse it until we are happy that the rinseate is coming off almost clear. We're balancing two goals here. We'd like to get as much of this contamination and acid out of the paper as possible, but we also want to minimize the total amount of time that the page is in an aqueous bath because we don't want inks to run. So we're going to go ahead, this again is the same solution, we're going to go ahead with another 5-minute bath. So we've had 10 total minutes now, we're about to enter 5 additional minutes. Again, no real manipulation necessary because the page is wetted. I'll let that sit 5 minutes. All right, so we've had a total of 15 minutes of wash now. Let's pull the page out of this bath. See how we're doing. Boy, that rinseate still looks pretty yellow, doesn't it? 3 is often all it requires when we use the Triton X100 as a surfactant in the first wash. Just like if you use soap, it takes you less time to wash your hands than if you were just using water. So I think we're going to be doing at least one more bath based on how dark this is. Now this is clearer than the first 2 washes, clearly, but still not approximating clear. That's still pretty dark by my estimation, so let's give it another wash and see how it goes. So I rinse my tray out and we will give it another bath. Again, exactly the same. It's 400 mils total. 100 mils of saturated calcium hydroxide solution, 300 mils of my limestone well water from my tap, double filtered. I got a little bit of a wrinkle in the Hollytex here, so I'm just gonna squeegee that out. The Hollytex helps keep the water in contact with the page, so it has total interaction times that are improved. And that transition was the 5-minute mark, so here we are removing it 5 minutes later. I've got fresh paper towels on the right. This is the 4th wash, so we've been 20 minutes total in aqueous bath now. A total of, I guess it would be 1.6 liters at this point. Let's see how this rinsate looks. Still pretty dark, but again, cleaner yet. I think we should probably do one more bath. That'll be 5 total. Let's see if that's enough to get it done. Let's have a look at this rinsate. Yeah, quite a bit clearer, but still not approximating clear. So let's go ahead with one more wash. So I've rinsed out my photo development tray. Hopefully one last wash of this 25% saturated calcium hydroxide. And back into the bath. I'm going to check in on this after 5 minutes, and if the rinsate is clear, which I hope it will be, I think I may leave this for 10 minutes. But I am going to sort out the Hollytex first and make sure that everything is nice and flat and presenting the maximum surface area to the fluid. Right, and then we'll give it again, hopefully one last bath. I did leave it for 10 minutes because after 5, the rinsate looked pretty clear. You can see it still looks pretty clear. So I think we're done finally after 5 total washes for a total of 30 minutes in aqueous bath. Now my changeovers take me a few minutes to do, so I would approximate another 30 minutes setting on the paper towels where the page is still obviously damp, wet. So total time here is about 1 hour. Let's have a look at this rinsate. Much better. Yeah, that's what we were looking for. That's not quite clear, but that's approximating clear. That was our goal here. So let's have a look at this. There we go. So I think we're done with the rinsing, and we can move on now to the paper mending steps. I like to do these tear seals directly on my hobby mat. So I'm going to remove these paper towels. They've absorbed the last of that water that still had, some contamination in it. So we want to get rid of them anyway. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this hobby mat over to my other workstation, which already has a larger hobby mat on it. So I'm going to go ahead and center this page where I know I'll have good lighting and my camera's set up for it already. And then I'm going to go ahead and move it over to my other workstation. So here's our top-down view from my other workstation. And the first thing I want to do here is get this page flat. I like to say billiard table flat. So I have some more of this 25% saturated calcium hydroxide. I'm going to wet the page. I'm going to wet the whole sandwich here. And you can see it was relatively dry. When you see the Holotext is really opaque and it's white, it's dry. And as I'm wetting it, you see it becomes essentially very translucent to the point of almost being transparent. So I'm going to wet that page and start to flatten it out. It has just little waves, crinkles, a little bit of air bubbles under it. Note that there's kind of a bump there right on the spine. I just touched the edge of it with the squeegee. I don't want to push too hardly on that. You can actually crease the paper. You need to coax it out very gently. And in fact, I don't think I have enough water here. So I'm going to add another light misting. And again, you can see the water setting into the Holotext, into the paper. The Holotext becoming nearly transparent. And now I've got enough water that I can move the paper around without damaging it. So I'm going to go ahead and squeegee now all of the air bubbles out. Tedious, but an important step, I believe, in my process. I don't tend to get noticeable shrinkage. Again, I haven't been measuring it super carefully before now. But I think in part I'm getting nice flat pages without shrinking, substantial shrinking, again, as far as I can tell, and also without cockling or other wrinkles or undulations in the paper. And I think in part at least it's because of the meticulous nature of making sure that the page is just as flat as a piece of granite here before we start. And that it's actually stretched out a bit on the hobby mat. So I've pushed some excess calcium hydroxide fluid out. I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off. Some of it's off camera. Again, it's about keeping your workstation tidy, clean, makes you less accident prone. And this page is still fairly wet, right? I wet it down enough so that I could move it easily to get it flat. Now I'm going to squeegee it again with just a little bit more pressure, a little bit more deliberately, and I'm attempting to actually dry it out a little bit here. So I'm intentionally pressing the water out, a little bit more pressure. You can see on the left, I'm pushing the water out of the sandwich. You may also be able to notice as I go here that the areas that I've squeegeed are just a little bit less transparent than the ones I haven't done yet. We'll see if that's noticeable as I go here. The reason that I want this page to be relatively dry, when I say relatively dry, what I'm looking for here is, imagine the paper is like a sponge, because it is. And imagine when you have a sponge that is 100% full of water. It's got as much water as it can hold. It's obviously wet, and it's saturated. If you take that sponge and you squeeze it out, and then set it back down, it's got a lot less water in it total, but it's still wet, right? Every part of the sponge is still wet. I want the page to be about that state when I do my tear seals here. And the reason why is because I want them to very readily absorb the adhesive that I'm going to apply. And the adhesive is mostly water by volume. So again, we're balancing two somewhat competing goals. I want the page to be wet in its entirety because that's how I'm going to get it nice and flat when I'm done and not have any cockling or differential expansion of the paper. But I also want it dry enough that it will absorb the adhesive really well, and the adhesive will actually penetrate down into the joint and into the paper and give us a good bond. So this is the balancing act that I'm doing, and that's why the state that the page is in is important for the way that I do this work. So there you see the edge of my ring light, and I'm adjusting it so that I can get a really good view of the work that I'm about to do. These little rips are essentially invisible now that the page is wet. I do know exactly where they are. I had photo reference, as you know. And here's the Japanese paper that I'm going to be using today. This is tengujo. I purchased from Talus. I don't have a link for you. I don't have an affiliation with them at all. This is the 5 grams per square meter. I'm going to start with the smallest tear first. Again, you can't even see where that is with the naked eye. I can barely tell with the magnification, really only because I already knew where it was. Then I'll place the next little piece of tengujo paper. Remember, these were tiny tears. Less than a 1/4 inch long was the longest of them, which happened to be the top one here as we're looking at it. So all I need is just a pinch of the Japanese paper. For each one, we just want something just to make sure that those tears don't get any larger and that the book is readable, that we can use it without causing further damage. That's really all we're trying to do. And you'll note as I place the paper, I'm just setting it down. The page and the Hollytext are damp enough that it's held in place. And that's the last tear, the most noticeable and the deepest one. Now that I've located those, I'm ready to apply some methyl cellulose. I just used the instructions on the label. I purchased this Archival methyl cellulose from Line Co. There's a link in the description to purchase it from Amazon. I'm just using a sable brush. Now the brush will work better if you wet it, so unfortunately I'm off camera there, but I just sprayed a little bit of that calcium hydroxide solution on my hobby mat, and I'm just going to get the brush damp. This will help the longevity of your brush and help with the application of the adhesive as well. And now we're ready to start gluing these little pieces of Japanese paper down. We'll put the adhesive in the center and then apply it radially outward from the center for a number of reasons. Note, I'm also going to stay away from that edge. I don't want to glue the tengujo to the Hollytext. It's true that it doesn't really want to stick to the Hollytext, but there's no reason to create a little point of adhesion there that I would have to deal with later. I want to take the tengujo paper, which you'll note I tore, I didn't cut, and I made sure it had a nice frayed edge with a lot of surface area. And I'm going to use my brush to apply the methyl cellulose paste in a way that it fans those frayed fibers of the Japanese paper out, which gives us a great bond with lots of surface area and good strength. Methyl cellulose is considered archival. It's also reversible. Just add water and you can peel the Japanese paper right back off. Now I'm going to go back over all of them and just spread the adhesive out a little more. get a nice thin coat so that the water and the adhesive can be absorbed down into the paper through the Japanese paper. Here I have a little fiber. I don't know if you can see that. I have one little stray fiber from the Hollytex, and I just didn't want it in my work. Right. So I'm just going to make sure I don't have a pool anywhere. I have the fibers all laid out nice and flat. And then I'm going to leave this to dry. About 10 minutes. Lighting is different here because I've turned the magnifying ring off, and you see that it's dried out a fair amount by virtue of how much less translucent the Hollytex is. And I'm just going to go ahead and dry this with paper towels and some weight. I have a piece of repurposed granite countertop that I'm going to throw on top of here. I'm just going to leave this first one about 10 minutes. And then I'll switch it to 2 paper towels below and on top, and I'll go about an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours overnight. Note that the last solution applied was the same as the washes. It was a 25% saturated calcium hydroxide solution. And this is done on purpose. It is not rinsed out because we're leaving what is called an alkaline reserve in the paper. The calcium ions will react with CO2 in the air as the water evaporates, and calcium carbonate will be deposited invisibly in the paper, which will protect the paper from acid buildup that can catalyze hydrolysis of the cellulose fibers and degradation of the paper. I think this is a good place to wrap up for today. I sincerely appreciate you joining me for wet cleaning, deacidification, and tear seals on this Golden Age comic book page. Next episode, we'll trim the excess Japanese paper from this page and have a look at the results before repeating this process on the rest of the inner wraps. Most of the materials I used today are available from Amazon in the affiliate links in the video description. If you need any of them for your own conservation efforts, I appreciate you using those links. If you enjoyed this video, please take a few seconds to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Until next time, take care of one another.